Hey, Natasha.
Hey Claire.
How's it going?
It's going well. I had to run here because I'm a little out of breath. Trying to fight my way through the laundry system here at Simmons Hall, the dorm that we're staying at.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So what is the laundry situation?
Okay, so it's if you ever used a laundromat, there's a ton of machines. So in this dorm, there's 360 people, and we have, I think, four laundry rooms. Each only have two washers and two dryers. So it is a battle of trying to get use of the washing and then dryer. And so up until this point, there's an app and you scan with your phone and then you have the machine number and then it charges you, you know, by the minute basically to use the machine. And it's pretty low cost. And the nice thing is the app alerts you like your clothes are almost done or come get them. It reminds you to go pick them up. Well, 2 weeks ago, they made it completely free. So you don't use your phone, you don't use an app, you just hit start and it's magical. It just washes your clothes. Now, what do you think the problem is?
Well, when things are free, they oftenly then aren't used well.
Nobody picks up their clothes. So yesterday I walk in and it's just mounds of clothes on the washer, on the dryer, on the tables. Very clean clothes, some sopping wet, because what happens if you leave your clothes in the washing machine, people will just take them out and put them on top because they want to
Oh,
use it. And then students are, so consumed by their studies, they forget what time of day it is and what's happening. And these clothes have
they
been
don't
sitting
change
here.
clothes.
No,
So,
right? I mean, there's this one set, this mound that I've just been watching, and it's like we're on day 7. And I'm like,
oh,
do you have clean underwear? Because it's right here. It's in the, I don't know who you are, but come get your clothes. So I appreciate it being free. And I just want to send an announcement to the students. Please set a timer on your phone to remind yourself to get your clothes.
so there's no way through this app. It doesn't tell you like a time. It's just it charges you or tells you it's charging you when the time's up. Is that how that works?
Yeah, basically it's linked to your phone. So it sends you a push notification that your clothes are done. But now you don't need to use your phone. And so you can check the app
Oh,
to see if it's done, but it's not going to ping you when it's
got it.
done. So we've relied on this app. Anyway, everything else is fine. I have 22 minutes on my clothes, so I'm keeping an eye on my timer.
Wow. Okay. Well, we can go fast so that you don't miss your laundry time
They'll
and
take it out.
ignore that notification, and then your clothes are going to be there forever.
Exactly.
That's crazy. So this makes me think of something that happens in my classroom, and maybe you can relate to this too. If I don't have a budget for my materials that my students
Mm.
use for their design challenges, what do you think happens?
Well, I know what happened to my students is they just grab everything that could possibly help, and you're left with this disaster in your room of supplies everywhere, and they probably don't use most of it. And the
Mhm.
tape goes so quickly because they just keep pulling rolls of tape and then throwing it away and starting over. Not good.
Yes. Mhm. Exactly. And also, what happens to the learning?
They don't have to think as hard because
Mhm.
they're like, let's just try it and see what happens. So it's this more of the tinkering approach where they're just playing around with the materials and then throwing it out and trying it again. Where if you actually give them limitations, they have to be more intentional with what they're doing.
Yes. Yeah, they really think through it, and then they actually learn about the materials, which is the reason why we have different material options. I had a student come to me today, and they're doing the botany challenge, so they're creating a plant device, and he brought some items to me from the makerspace, and he's trying to decide which thing to spend his budget on. He's like, "Can the sun go through this material?" I was like, "Great question. Why don't you try it out?" He's like, "But could it go through this material?" It's like, "Go try it out." So otherwise, he would have just grabbed whatever and like just used things, but he really has to think through the material selection. And I was thinking through that before I even knew your debacle with the laundry and the free stuff. But anytime I give my students no constraints or unlimited budget for their supplies, all this freedom. It's too much freedom, and they don't really make good business decisions. It's all a transaction. They're all business decisions. Even in engineering, when I worked as an engineer and there were things I wanted to try, I would always have pushback of, well, we need to make sure that's going to work before we use these materials and use up this money and use up our time, because we're paying R&D to do this, and they've got other projects coming through. It's all business transactions that you have to think about. And so that made me think, should we be training our students to all be entrepreneurs? Like,
Yes.
should they be not only just wearing engineering and science hats, but also the business hats? Should we focus and think of them all as, you are an entrepreneur? What are your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. I think we are entrepreneurs in so many aspects of our life. Of course, there is this idea of create something new, but just in your daily life of how can I innovate on what I'm doing, and putting that critical thinking hat on making things better and creating new things. And when you see a problem, you see an opportunity and you get excited and you're like, how can I solve this? I love that. But I also like the piece of making them realize the practical constraints of the real world. You're not going to get the full makerspace cart and all these unlimited supplies. We, as working adults, face some very realistic constraints. And I think starting young with this idea of just balancing the budget and being very mindful of the materials you're making and intentional is so important. So tell me more of what you're thinking of how you're going to build this entrepreneurial spirit.
I think I'm really trying to figure out how I'm going to approach this with my students, because do I want to use that word entrepreneur? I have two kind of buckets of students. Ones that want to be an entrepreneur, want their own business. They don't want to have a boss. So I've had conversations like, they're like, well, when I get older, I'm going to have my own business and I'm going to do this and I'm not going to have to think about that. And then I have to tell them it's actually quite the contrary. Like, you will always have a boss. It may not be your boss like telling you when to come in at work, but the IRS is sure going to make sure that you're paying your taxes, and you've got all these other laws,
And the
property
customer is
laws.
your boss.
Customers is the yeah, exactly. Your customer is the boss. Your spouse is probably also your boss.
Yeah, let's be
but
real.
So I've got those that I need to kind of bring back down to real world and kind of make sure they understand that there's constraints in the real world, like you were talking about. And then I have others who are like, no, I do not want to be an entrepreneur. I want to like fit into the machine of wherever the workplace is. And I just want to do some like really small detail. Like, this is the thing that I want to do. I don't want to mess with all the other things. I don't want to make the business decisions. It's like, no, you are also going to have to understand that too. Just like when I was an engineer and had to figure out, well, the business side and how the machines work, because I had constraints there. I couldn't design something that the machine couldn't make. So you still have to know how everything works to be able to fit in that tiny spot of whatever big company you're going to work for. So I'm trying to figure out, how can I make my classroom like a miniature world, and how you can fit into this. And that's why a lot of our design challenges say, your engineering company has been selected to do whatever it is. I want them to really feel like it's a company. Like, you have to make business transactions and figure out your budget on your materials. So I always do a budget. Second grade and up, we learn about how to budget for your materials. And then what other things should we be considering in order to make this a reality, but also fun? Like, I don't want to start taxing my students or anything like that.
Really?
Or do I?
That could be interesting. They're going to go home and they're going to be like, so tax season's here. Can I
Yeah,
help?
they're like, oh, there was inflation in STEM today. And then mm-hmm.
Well, I know we're, currently working on this new curriculum for fifth grade, and we've been talking a lot about innovation and how we can introduce patents and, different inventors and what the invention process is like. And so I think that's, a kind of a fun way. So maybe you can give patents in your class.
Ooh.
have this idea of, ooh, that design idea has been patented, nobody else can copy it, which is actually counter than I think you do it, because right now you kind of let them look around. Ooh, you're liking this.
Yeah, this is really intriguing.
But giving them like some kind of award or piece of paper that's like, your patent has been approved. And also they have to explain it really well. And I know that's part of, we've talked about showing them patents and can you understand what this drawing is doing? And then we had a guest earlier on the podcast, and this idea of, can your customer use what you invented? Maybe you know how to use it, but can someone else use it? And does it work? So thinking about that customer client interface. So I feel like there's so many elements you can take from the startup space, like this entrepreneurship space, from a pitch deck to market research to technical analysis. Like these are all phases that we often do a little bit of, but in engineering design, it's very focused on just the technical analysis, the design itself. We often don't go to the market research beyond like show it to your classmates, but it might be fun to have them go show it to an actual customer. So yeah, I'm intrigued. I think those are components we should pull into this curriculum.
I have so many ideas right now. This is great. So I think what you kind of touched on before, and we both like understood what we were talking about, but probably need to elaborate more on here for those that are in the chair or the chase, as I think of it. I think of our listeners. I don't know if maybe this is weird, but I feel like most of our listeners are teachers. And I would like to imagine that they are not working today because they took the day off as a mental health day. And they are laying on their chase and they are sipping on lemonade or coffee, probably a cappuccino, and they're listening to our podcast. So I imagine it's the STEM space chase that they're relaxing on. So if I refer to the chase, that's what I'm
I had no idea what you're talking
about because that's what's in my head. So if I've said that before and you're like, what? Yes.
So I think most of our listeners are probably in the car driving to school. You don't
Which
like
sounds
that?
really stressful. So that I don't think of them that
Okay.
way. They're in their
Maybe
chase.
they're on a leisurely walk around their neighborhood.
That works too. Yeah.
Okay.
So to those on the chase, what we were referring to before when you were talking about students patenting their idea, we usually encourage them as like, we are all one team. My classroom is one team and we are learning from each other because we don't want to reinvent the wheel over and over again because then we'll never progress. So I always encourage copying, or anytime some student gets upset, always. They're like, that was my idea. Like, you're copying me. I'm like, no, that means you had a great idea and you found something that works. And so you should be excited that somebody else is acknowledging that you had a great idea and they're going to build upon it. And maybe we can all learn from each other that way. And that's why we do the little gallery walk where you stop halfway through the project, you walk around and see other ideas that students are doing. They're like, oh, that would solve the problem I was having. Like, that's wonderful. Let's improve upon each other's ideas. But with this patent idea, that could be another way of, hey, you found something really great that works that nobody else is doing. Well, now you need to explain that to me, why it works, how you got there, how can you do this again? Is this the materials that you want to stick with whatever this is? Let's talk through how a patent works, and then I can award them a patent so that nobody else can do it that way. So I see that as a really great outlet of two roads they can choose if they come to this impasse of, I don't want anybody to copy me.
And maybe it would only work with specific activities or problems that are maybe a little more open-ended, because if they're all trying to do like the candy grabber challenge, there's only so many ways perhaps to solve that problem. But if it's like invent something to help someone, like it's very open-ended, like a stage 3 project, then I think this could work, because I still like your other philosophy of like, it's such a good idea that people are copying it, improving upon it. We're all a team. Like, I like that. But is it real?
You know, patents expire after 20 years. That I wonder if I could have patents and like have a patent wall and showcase my students' patents that they do in the classroom, but it expires after 2 weeks. So after 2 weeks, if we're doing another project, somebody else could copy it, but it's like they had the original patent. So that would be kind of cool. It's like, oh, well, you're doing the Hayden. That's the Hayden widget. And yeah.
I have a story.
Okay.
So on our Instagram, I'm doing a couple of videos featuring women in STEM, like STEM inventors and innovators, and I'm trying to find people that I had never heard of. And so you talked about a patent expiring. Do you know the story of Mary Anderson?
No, that seems like a really common name, but I've not heard of Mary Anderson.
So yeah, so she's a woman that was in Alabama, a very fancy socialite, just like imagine the fancy hat,
I
right?
see it.
Can you see it? Okay. And so it's 1902, and she goes to New York City, and it's snowing, and she's in one of those trolley cars, and it's snowing so heavily that the driver's having a hard time seeing. And the way they would take the snow off of the windshield is they would manually come out and move the snow with a brush or stop the trolley car and wipe off the snow. She's like, this is ridiculous. Like, there has to be a better way. So she goes back to Alabama and invents the windshield. It's a lever that's inside the car that moves these rubber blades, just kind of like we have today,
Windshield wipers.
windshield wipers. And she puts a patent, and the patent's approved. So this is like 1903. So I don't know if the rules changed, but back then the patents expired after 17 years. And she is going to different car manufacturers, and she's like, this will improve your vehicles. This is right when automobiles are coming out. They think it's a dumb idea. They're like, I'm not wasting time on this. We have a perfectly acceptable system, leaning her out the car. And like, what? And so, unfortunately, her patent expires. And 1 year later, Cadillac decides it's a good idea and installs windshield blades on all of the cars. And she never gets a penny for this patent.
That is really sad.
I know.
Hmm.
So, I don't know what the moral of the story is, but Mary Anderson is the inventor of the windshield wipers.
They are no longer called windshield wipers. They are Mary Andersons on my
There you
car.
go.
Turn on the Andersons.
But it's like such a simple idea. And it's like these car manufacturer people are just like, well, we have a solution. And you're like, safety, convenience, like it solved so many things, and they just couldn't see the value in it.
So that's another point as to why we have our students share their project ideas, is they need to be able to market what they built. Otherwise, it's all for nothing. If you cannot share your idea, it doesn't move us forward. So maybe more persuasive presenting of ideas on why mine's better. That might not be a good idea. But how it can improve life, maybe that would be the persuasive
And that's
argument.
so important. And we've talked about that with your design challenges is you might have the best idea, but if no one can understand it and nobody, believes in it, it's never going to happen. And that's the other piece of the real world is investors. Will they invest in your idea? So what I need you to do, Claire, is Shark Tank style.
Yes.
I will come and give Monopoly money to your students and give them prizes for the best idea.
I love it. I kind of had that scenario this morning with my junior high students. They're working on the high altitude balloon project, and they are coming up with science experiments, and we had to narrow it down to 3 to present to the school. And so each table, I have 5 tables, and they all had to come up with 2 ideas. We've been narrowing down all sorts of crazy ideas. They had to narrow it down to 2 per table, and then it was like debate time. And so they were arguing why they should have their idea should be one of the ones that is voted on by the school. And it got intense. And like the things that they were throwing out there, I was like, I had to keep reining them back in and be like, okay, we're talking about what's going to move science forward, not what's cool.
It's a hard challenge.
And it was so hard. I mean, silly string, that was one of the ones that got heated. And people were like, well, it's going to explode and then it could harm our instruments. And the other ones, were like, well, what could that do for science? And people were like, well, you might need something like that on Mars. What?
We're trying. This is where you get to be creative.
It was great. Yeah. So they love to debate anyway. So it'd be really interesting to have a Shark Tank for ideas, even if they're not inventions, just your ideas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that entrepreneurship is something we should talk about in the classroom because that is what we're doing. We just haven't really thought about it that way, and to be more intentional about showing them all the ways that what they're going to do in the future involves all the things: business, engineering, science.
I
So
agree.
that'll be really neat. Okay. Well, for now, STEM space out.
In today's teacher talk, we have a question from Haima, and her question is, what is your experience in teaching activities from TK? I'm thinking this is similar to pre-K to 5th grade. She has 45 minutes for each grade. So she's prepping 7 classes a day and is feeling overwhelmed. Help. Claire, you're the perfect one to answer.
I am in the same boat as you. Yes, it's a lot, and those are quick classes. The best way I would say is to involve your students in helping you. So anything you can outsource to your students as far as prep, supplies, don't feel like you need to gather everything for every class and put it all away for every class. Your students should be doing that. So it's just like how you train your kids at home to be the ones helping with the dishes and helping with all the chores. That's too much for one person to do. So I would have things color coded. That's one of the biggest things I do, is so every class has their own color. Kindergarten knows that red is their color, so all the bins that are red belong to them. So if they need colors, if they need their lab notebooks, if they need whatever supplies, you'll find it's in a red bin somewhere in my room, and they know where to put everything else. And we have routines. So that would be it. I have 3 minutes in between my classes as well, so I don't have time to switch out. Yeah, which means that if anybody shows up early or late, I have 0 minutes, which is always the case.
Oh my
So
God, I'm stressed.
yes, they should all have assigned seats and know where to get their own things. I have a slide deck that I use. So if you're able to project a presentation, that is what I prepare for class every day. And it cues me on what I should be doing, because that's too much information to keep in my head as well. So all I'm doing is clicking through slides. I usually put my seating chart on my slides. So every class starts with a slide that has their seating chart and says, welcome, today we will be doing this. And then they'll go to find their seats. They're ready to learn. I'm ready to teach because I'm like, oh yeah, we're doing plants today, because that's what I put on my slide. And then I just walk through my slides and it talks through everything. And then I stop 5 minutes early for them to be able to put everything away and get lined up on their own, ready to go to the next class. So hope that helps.
I love that. Well, if you have a question for us from we can answer, you can go to our Facebook group, The STEM Space, or just find us on social media at OFI STEM.